as a former player, as a fan, for our game, today is a sad day. We came to Florida to navigate or to negotiate for a fair collective bargaining agreement. Despite meeting daily while here in Florida, there is still work that needs to be done. We are seeking improvements to our CBA because significant improvements are needed. We've made no mistake about that fact over the course of the last 3 or 4 years based on what we've seen on the field and off the field. It's against that backdrop of growing revenues and record profits for owners in the league that players seek and deserve nothing more than fundamental fairness. Players want to play. We all know that. But the reason we're not playing is simple. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. Let me repeat that. A lockout is the ultimate economic weapon. In a $10 billion industry, the owners have made a conscious decision to use this weapon against the greatest asset they have, the players. But the group won't be intimidated. I've seen more unity over the last few years than at any time in our recent history. Our guys care deeply about the game, care deeply about the fans, and care deeply about our player fraternity. And they are focused on improving the rights and benefits for today's generation of player and for the generations to come. Needless to say, we remain committed to the bargaining process and getting back on the field as soon as possible. Sylvia, are we opening the floor?
If you have a question, if you can approach the mic and ask.
I guess this is for anyone who wants to answer it. I mean, you guys knew coming in this was going to be contentious and they weren't going to kind of roll over for you, but was there anything about the way the owners approached this or their priorities that surprised you and complicated this even more than you thought?
Thank you for the question. And I suppose I should have introduced the folks that are here on the dais. To my right, Andrew Miller. To my left, Bruce Meyer with the PA, and Max Scherzer on his left. In regard to the process and what we've seen, the entire process has been an interesting one, to say the least. In a world where you are looking to make changes, make adjustments, make improvements based on what it is you're seeing, you understand that you need as much time as possible to work through those things. It's why we started the process when we did in April. It's why we made the core economic proposals that we did in the first part of May. It's why we remained available, whether on Zoom or as the pandemic afforded us the opportunity to meet in person. We made ourselves available then. It's why we sequestered ourselves in a hotel in Dallas with the hope of working toward an agreement. It's why we stood ready for 6 weeks after the lockout on December 1st, ready to have a discussion. It is remarkably interesting against the backdrop of the things that needed to be worked through to find ourselves on February 28th, over the course of the last week in West Palm Beach, working through the issues that, quite honestly, needed to be and could have been and should have been discussed in more depth much earlier than they were.
Guys, Tony, in light of your comments, and for any of you, there clearly was some progress made, movement made these last couple of days. How far away do you think you are from a fair agreement?
We have work to do. The time here has been productive from the standpoint of having, again, conversations and dialogue that could have been had sooner. And I say that not because the issues aren't challenging. I say that because we've been committed to having those conversations since day one. So again, us being here over the course of the last week, productive conversation. We look forward to getting back to work at it as soon as possible.
And if I could ask a follow, we've kind of all seen this storm coming for quite a while. There's just been a lot of rhetoric both ways. And I'm wondering if you feel now that we're here at this bad place, whether anything could have been done differently on your guys' side to avoid this.
Being done differently other than being available and making sure that the concerns that we had and that the adjustments that we were looking to make were on the table as early as humanly possible to give us as much time to work through them, yeah, I wouldn't have changed any of that. And let me say this too. Games were canceled today. We have a number of players that are here to my left, and I'm grateful for them being here. And they represent a much larger group that is out there. During the course of a player's career, you only get so many opening days. You're fortunate enough to get one in the big leagues. If you're an average major leaguer, you might see 4 of them. Having an opportunity to play as long as humanly possible and find yourself in a world where now for the second time in 2 years, the schedule is shorter than it otherwise should have been or could have been is a problem.
Thank you.
We have a question on the phone from Maury Brown. Maury?
Hey, this is for either Tony or Bruce. This is Maury Brown. So it was obvious that there was some concessions early on. Certainly there was word that expanded playoffs were there. There was talk about sponsor patches. I mean, there were a number of concessions very early on that seemed fairly comprehensive that might seem to make things move in a more positive direction by the league. First of all, was that by design? Was the sponsor patch conversation ever part of the conversation? And do you feel in retrospect that maybe having that out on the table early, given the fact that the owners seem to be more incremental in their movements, might have been detrimental?
Hi, Maury, it's Bruce. I may be misremembering. I think we may have put that on the table in Dallas. In Dallas, in the hopes of trying to avoid a lockout. We came down there prepared, as always, to negotiate in good faith. In Dallas, we among other things, put those on the table. Also, I think for the first time said we would agree to a form of expanded playoffs, not the format that MLB wanted, but and those things had tremendous value to MLB, and so we think there are a lot of features in the things that we offered, obviously beneficial to players, but that would also have been a great benefit to the owners.
For Max and for Andrew, looking at the goals of the overall group, it looks from far like basically the differences between the parties are money on CBT, the 0 to 3 pool, and minimum salaries. Is that the wrong impression we have? And if it's correct impression, how far are you apart from what you're looking for?
To speak on that specifically, that we came into these negotiations understanding that the landscape across the game has changed and that more young players more than ever are entering the game and producing at high levels than we've ever seen before. We as players wanted to address that and obviously raise their level of compensation up relative to league revenues so that better reflected that compensation level. And so as we navigated through the process, we still feel there's dollars to be allocated towards them that would fairly compensate their contributions on the field more so than what's on the table at this point. And as players, we recognize that and continue to fight for those guys, that it's not about Andrew or me in the free agent level, that it's us as the free agents looking backwards and realizing that we need to allocate more of those resources to them.
It's not just money. The money can be important in order to have the market operate in a functional way, in which we've seen abuses and we've seen trends take advantage of maybe places in which players are not receiving as much as they're contributing, as well as we have been screaming for years about competition issues, and those are important to us. This is not just about shifting pieces of the pie around. This is about getting the game that we love to work and operate as best as it can and go out there and perform and let us focus on what we like to do, and that's compete.
This can be for anyone. Actually, I have two. Rob said something in his press conference about there being wiggle room. Is that an indication sort of that this wasn't the end point they were going to end at? That's not a great way of phrasing that. Did he indicate that to you, or did Dan or whoever indicate that there was wiggle room?
Hi, Hannah. It's fair to say that today they were very clear that the last thing they gave us was their best and final offer. They used the words best and final, as Dan did several times. But to be clear, as I understood that, that meant best and final before making their decision to announce canceling games. I assume they're not done negotiating. I hope they're not done negotiating. They have a legal obligation to negotiate. So I assume it's not best and final forever, but they were very clear that what they gave us today was best and final for today before making their decision to take down some games.
And they've been pretty clear that games that are canceled will not be made up and players will not be paid for that. How do you guys sort of see the schedule factoring into the negotiations going forward?
I'll just say that, their decision to say they won't reschedule games if games are canceled, or they won't pay players for those games that are canceled, is wholly their position. They're not legally required to take those positions. It would be our position in the event of games being canceled that as a feature of any deal for us to come back, that we would be asking for compensation or to have those games rescheduled. So again, they're free to take that position. We would have a different position. And of course, last year, as I think you know, they actually proposed delaying the season by a month, and they actually proposed rescheduling games to get 154 in and to pay players for 162 for playing 154. So they can do it. There's a precedent for it.
To be clear, are you saying you would not agree to a deal that doesn't compensate players for 162 games?
Our position is that if the league decides unilaterally to pull down games and then we have a deal, that players should get compensated for those games.
The statement today said that you guys think that the owners are trying to break the union, and I'd love to hear from anybody who wants it, but particularly from Max and Andrew. Is there something about the way these negotiations have gone, something you've seen or heard or felt that tells you that? Where is that coming from?
It's not as simple as this negotiation. We've seen free agent markets not operate in the way that we expect them to. We've seen parts of the system not function the way they're supposed to, and the tactics that we have seen when it does come to sort things out have been, needless to say, frustrating at times. So you start to wonder when you see, obviously COVID was a horrible situation for everybody in every place, but the return to work, the struggles we had with that. And, when we sit down and try to lay things out and work on the forthcoming CBA and address these issues, to have the difficulty in getting to the table and actually communicating, you start to wonder exactly how you're being looked at by the other side.
To echo that, it's more about unifying the union and understanding the desires from everybody in our group, and talking to all the guys over here and understanding that we were fighting together as one. We all understood the problems that were within the game that needed to be corrected. And together, we all together believed in what we were fighting for, and all the way to the end here, of making sure that everybody understood what we were trying to accomplish, and that everybody wanted to accomplish the same goals for everybody.
Just real quick, as far as player unity goes and the length of time this could go, are there discussions about how long guys are prepared to not play?
We're prepared. We've seen this coming in a sense. It's unfortunate, but this isn't new to us. This is not shocking. It's, again, unfortunate, but our communication, our willingness to see each other's point of views and to find solutions and to fight for what's right is nothing like I've seen before. I can tell you that.
Right, and this has been making in the years of seeing things that have happened over the course, specifically of this last CBA, things that have happened to different players that has made us outraged in certain situations that we absolutely have to have corrections, and that's why we feel necessary to be able to continue this fight.
Bruce, you said before how you would now, you're for pay, back pay, potentially service time now becomes a position that you're going to have to take, but you're now adding more big issues to a long list of issues you already have. So what gives you the confidence that there is a better deal that could come your way?
Well, I think it's like any labor situation. I mean, our whole labor process basically plays out this way. We have our positions. We feel strongly about them. The players feel strongly about them. We think they're fair. We think they're reasonable. We believe we've been negotiating good faith from the beginning. The league obviously has a different view, and this is the way the labor process plays out. The league is attempting, as Tony said, to use its economic weapons, and the players, as the guys have said, are unified in fighting for what's right here. So, the alternative is to take a deal that we and the players feel is not a fair deal. That's really the only alternative. Either take a deal that the players don't feel is fair, or continue to fight. At the end of the day, as you know, it's the league's lockout. They can decide to end it whenever they want. So players really don't have much of a choice in that. But players, as Andrew said, and Max are committed to fighting for a deal that they think is fair.
And to that point, I'm just curious, at any point during this week, was there ever a conversation about the league lifting the lockout in exchange for some sort of no strike commitment or anything like that?
No.
We'll take another one from the Zoom call. Another question?
Hey, real quick, Rob mentioned in his presser that you guys needed to travel and that the soonest you guys could get together again would possibly be Thursday. When asked whether they would come to you guys or whether you would go to them, he alluded to the fact that they made the last offer and that basically kind of put it in your court. What is the soonest that you feel you will be able to re-engage since the ball in your court, and when do you feel you can re-engage?
Well, I'll say they made an offer which, again, they characterized as best and final. To me, that means don't bother counter-offering, and that's what best and final means, at least today. In terms of whose court the ball is in, I think it's incumbent on both sides to be at the negotiating table. We're certainly prepared to do that whenever it makes sense, and I assume they are as well.
Understanding that the deadline was one that was chosen by the owners and then arbitrarily extended to kind of fit their thing, it still was enough to create urgency for a 17-hour negotiating session and 9 consecutive days of it. How do you recreate that? What recreates that kind of urgency that could get you all to a place where I get the sense you felt some progress was made as a result of a ticking clock?
Derek, I'll say this. If there's an interest to go back to the field now and continue to have a conversation, we'll go back to the field now and continue to have a conversation. From day one, we've been committed to the process and committed to having the discussions that needed to be had in order to find common ground on a fair agreement. It doesn't change. They set a deadline. We had a deadline at the end of the CBA. They set a deadline here. We're willing to stay here and have the conversation tomorrow. We're willing to fly back to New York. We're willing to go wherever we need to go to get back in the room and continue the dialogue that has begun, that began a long time ago, and that had some progress over the course of the last few days against the deadline that they set.
Do you get the sense, even with this press conference here, that the progress made is where you begin the next conversations, or does some of this then have to restart? Do you feel like where you're at, Bruce?
I guess I'll just say, as I think you guys know, there was some progress made on certain issues this week, but I think we've also been clear and consistent that there were major issues on which we were very far apart. We've said that to the media consistently. We've said that to the other side consistently. So that hasn't changed. There have been and still are, major issues. We'll continue to work on those and hopefully continue to build on the progress that we may have made on other areas. As you know, there are a lot of issues. I mean, so some we're further apart on than others, but ultimately we have to resolve all of them.
It's for Max. We know expanded postseason was one of those issues. Did you prefer 12-team postseason? If so, why? Because obviously a 14-team postseason meant more money towards the players, and I understand the competitive issue, but wasn't the money maybe worth the two teams, considering all the economic issues at hand?
Well, it really became down to a format issue. In a 14-team playoff structure, we felt like competition could be eroded in that scenario, and we had specific examples of different players who spoke up that highlighted that specifically for that reason. And through the working with the economists on the union staff, we felt like we had devised a format that would incentivize you would incentivize competition throughout all the seeds, and especially for division winners. And that was very, very important to us, because when we play 162 games, when you're out there, and I know we're all trying to win that division. I mean, that's such an important piece to this. When we're out there playing the games, to have that remain true. If that piece wasn't in the puzzle in the 14-team playoff structure, we didn't see that home field advantage, solely home field advantage, was going to be the necessary piece to try to go out there and win your division. And so for that reason, that's why a 12-team format made more sense to us.
The bye for the division winners wasn't an incentive enough?
But then continuing on from those division winners down, we didn't see the proper incentive for those other two division winners.
It was a bye just for one division winner?
Right, yeah, or each league. That's
Right.
A core goal of this negotiation is to increase competition. There's no way we're leaving the table without something that does that. And there are proposals, and we've spent a lot of time debating the merits of various playoff formats, and there's probably not a better guy to ask in the room than Max. But we're not going to do anything that sacrifices competition and sees anything that points towards mediocrity. That's the antithesis of our game and what we're about as players.
We didn't understand why they didn't want to take us up on a more competitive format.
We have Liz Mullen on the phone.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, hi. Hi, Tony. Hi, Bruce. Hi, Chris. Hi, Sylvia. Hi, players. Liz Mullen, Sports Business Journal. Now that games are canceled, is there, what we've seen in other sports over the last couple of decades, the NHL specifically, we saw multiple players who were able to play hockey in Europe, professional hockey in Europe. I believe in the NBA, one of the NBA lockouts, at least one, we've seen exhibition games with NBA players. Are there any plans to do any sort of exhibition games or explore any foreign markets? And also, what are the training plans for the baseball players who are locked out? Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. There's nothing planned in regard to a global tour of exhibitions. As we highlighted earlier, there's a desire to get back in the room and back at the table. So that is the focus. But in regard to training, the guys have been training. The guys will continue to train. There will be opportunities, whether as a large group or a small group, to continue to make sure that when the lights do come on, they're ready to go whenever that happens to be. I think at this point, the guys continue to work through the calendar as they normally would, such that the fans can be completely confident that when the lights come on, the guys will be ready to go.
Thank you.
It's James Wagner, the New York Times. What's up, everyone? Two questions to follow up on that. Like, what else are you guys doing to, I guess, support players throughout this time? Medical benefits, financially, I mean, the trading, like you're talking about, at however long this might last. If you could just detail what you guys do for everyone.
Thank you, Wax. So in a scenario where players are locked out, it is important to make sure that in all the preparations we've done prior to, and all the things that are going on during the course of that lockout, that, as you just referenced, their rights are being protected and the support that they need is being provided. Sometimes that support is financial. You mentioned benefits and medical. As most may or may not be aware, the medical benefits run April 1st to April 1st. In the event that games are missed, it's important to make sure that for the players and for their families that medical coverage continues. So we have a responsibility to make sure that that happens. From a financial standpoint, there are, much like in 2020, when we played less than a full season, support was provided via a stipend mechanism. That started for players on February 1st of this year. Today is February 28th. Oh, today is March 1st. Sorry, we've been in a room for a bit.
You got extensions, so it's okay.
Yeah. March 1st. Today was another distribution, and players have been made aware that they will receive financial support on April 1st as a result of the preparations that have been made in the event that they needed to be provided.
Then the second question, the league, I guess they valued today's best and last proposal as like $500 million in additional compensation for players. If you, based Bruce specifically or Tony, could you explain why, whether you do agree with that, and then why that deal specifically was not, to your guys' liking, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I believe we have economists and analysts here who could speak to this better than I do, but the difference between our proposals for getting the younger guys paid, the pre-arbitration players, I think ours was around $90 to $100 million a year more for those guys. We just didn't think it was enough. You know, those guys, those young guys, are the guys who have their values perhaps the most suppressed of any players. Those are guys who are under control of the teams. Those are guys who don't have access to free agency. Pre-arb guys obviously don't have access to salary arb. So those guys are providing enormous economic benefits to the teams, economic surpluses to the teams. And so, as Max and Andrew said, one of our main priorities is to get those guys paid more. And the simple answer is we just don't think that the league's proposal was enough, was fair, given the background of the league's, revenues. And so, we think they deserve more is really the answer.
We have a question from Ken Rosenthal.
This question is for Tony and the players. Guys, how much damage did the game suffer today?
Ken, the game has suffered damage for a while now. The game has changed. The game has been manipulated. I often tell folks that ask me about the changes in the game that either, just because my beard is as white as it is doesn't mean I'm as old as I look, but the game that I grew up on, the game that our guys play, how that game is played has changed. As a result of that change, the game that a lot of baseball fans have grown up knowing has changed. The value inherent in how players are respected and viewed has changed. Players have been commoditized in a way that is really hard to explain in the grand scheme of things. The game has continued to be damaged and is again damaged today as a result of a lockout that was started by the league, as a result of a deadline that was set by the league, and in a climate that has been challenging for us as baseball fans, for those of us who love to go to the ballpark. I think I started tonight's dialogue, Ken, by saying it's a sad day. And if you love baseball the way players do, if you love baseball the way fans do, it's hard not to be sad with where we are on March 1st, 2022, when there is truly an opportunity to have these guys back on the field doing what they love and fans supporting what it is that they do and the game that they love in a way that's far different than us having press conferences in hotel rooms in Florida and talking about games not being played in the near future.
Tony, what was your reaction to the on-field rules changes they suggested, the pitch clock, the shifts, those kinds of things?
Ken, for months, we have suggested to the league to make a proposal on their on-field concerns. For months, we have told the league that players are more than are willing to talk about the types of things that you, the league, think we should be talking about with regard to on-field. That dialogue has been open and available as a part of the overarching conversation for a long time. The fact that it manifested itself in the last 72 hours is strange when both sides, I think, are committed to making sure that the game itself is protected. So if they have want to have a conversation about pitch clocks, do we like pitch clocks? We've talked about pitch clocks for years, and we've got timers on the field in a game that is timeless. Should we talk about shifts? The league wants to talk about shifts. Well, players are willing to talk about shifts. We're talking about oversized bases. Okay, well, if we need to talk about oversized bases, then let's talk about oversized bases. The very premise of that type of interaction from a player's side is the protection and advancement of the game. Health and safety for players, protection and advancement of the game. Players have been willing to have that conversation, demonstrated an openness to having that dialogue for a long time now. So whether it was back in May or June when we imparted or implored the league to make a proposal and include it as a part of the conversation, or whether it's the last 72 hours, guys are prepared to talk about how to move the game forward.
This is for Max and Andrew. Particularly Max, how important was the luxury tax threshold? You know, in the sense when you play for the Nationals, big payroll, Detroit, Dodgers last year, and now the Mets. How big of an issue is this for you and Andrew as far as free agency?
Well, we look at the competitive balance tax as a breakaway spending mechanism. That's how this thing was originally negotiated. And when you look at the history of baseball here and our labor, we're not seeing that function as breakaway spending. We're seeing it act as a salary cap, and no other way can be shown point blank and simple than the San Diego Padres having a higher payroll than the New York Yankees.
Yeah, and Bob, not to pick on you, but why should the CBT affect me differently than Max? It affects every single player, and I mean that. We've seen it, we've heard it. Every one of us, if we haven't felt it directly affect us, we have an agent or we have a friend or a teammate that it has affected, and it's not functioning the way it was intended. It's incredibly important to just the way the game works, and we've seen it. I don't want to say necessarily abused, but taken advantage of and used in a way that it was not intended, and we have a great issue with that.
Yeah, thanks.
Marcos Grunfeld on the phone.
Hello, Tony. Hello, Bruce. I have a couple of questions. The first one is the league had said that they need a month for the spring training to be played after the lockout is ended. And my question is, do you think that is enough time for the teams to make all the roster moves that they didn't can make in the past 3 months? And the second question, there is some conversation about the World Baseball Classic, which is supposed to be played next year.
Gotcha. I thought there was another piece to the end of that question. I apologize. In regards to the schedule and the calendar, you would have to ask the teams how they function. And against the backdrop of the calendar, players will be ready as soon as the lights come on, I think, as I mentioned earlier. As it relates to the World Baseball Classic, there are a lot of moving pieces that remain on the table. There are discussions that still need to be had. Obviously, our focus right now is the start of the 2022 season. That's what we're focused on now.
One last question from Maury on the phone.
Yeah, hey, Tony, I wanted to follow up on what Ken was asking about on the field. It was reported that Rob wanted to try and move his ability to go unilateral much sooner. I want to say 45 days from notification. He's now can give a year's notice. You mentioned that you've been ready to have the dialogue about it on the field, and then it came up at the last second. Is there a feel amongst the body that Rob is really trying to move this into more of a unilateral thing? He talks often about wanting to have a partnership with the players on these things, but do you feel that there's a shift? What's the attitude of the players on that?
You'd have to ask Rob what Rob's desire is. It's clear that what he put in a recent proposal was with an eye on shortening the length of time necessary to make an on-field change. But as I highlighted a little while ago, players are willing to have that conversation. Players are also very much interested in protecting the game itself. So while wanting to move the game forward, while acknowledging that the game has changed dramatically, you always have to be cognizant of why the game may have changed and may have been adjusted, and be very deliberate and careful from the standpoint of just changing rules to change rules. But having said that, there's nobody more than the players that wants the game to be represented in the best fashion that it can be. As a player, we dedicate our lives to this game and playing this game at the highest level we possibly can, and there's nothing we won't do to protect it.